Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us or for downloading this webcast. Today's topic is green building and hazardous material management with Tiffany Lamb. If you like this video, check out horizon.ca for more on the various aspects of ARCHIBUS, and you can watch for yourself an integrated workplace system, an IWMS in action. We won't get to everything today, or likely ever, but if you like what you see or you have more questions, don't hesitate to contact us or your account manager here at Horizon to learn more. ARCHIBUS is used by over 8 million users and over 16,000 companies. So these are campuses, government departments, cities, and organizations, all seeking to gain efficiencies, automations, and reporting on their portfolios and asset life cycles. Horizon has webinars, workshops, user groups, and the self-serve video library, all available for more knowledge, share, and learning on this powerful, flexible, and secure enterprise system. But for the next little while, we're going to discuss Clean Building ARCHIBUS application, and I think we're going to take a look at it from various perspectives. Now, Tiffany Lamb's going to walk us through it. She's out of our Calgary office. Now, the clean building will streamline the time-consuming and highly regulated process of identifying and abating indoor environmental hazards. As you all know, successful facility managers and professionals need to actively monitor the potential of indoor environmental hazards, such as asbestos and radon, all the way to lead paint and mold. ARCHIBUS Clean Building helps managers protect the health of the building occupants, minimize the organizational liability, and avoid costly fines or possible litigation down the road. Unlike spreadsheets or other non-integrated tools, web-based ARCHIBUS Clean Building provides a flexible and highly systematic process to help ensure all hazardous materials are quickly and accurately located, tracked, and abated using searches that connect directly to graphical views of space and equipment inventories. Clean Building's ability to easily share and integrate hazardous materials data with other systems and processes greatly decreases the likelihood of errors and omissions, averts unnecessary shutdown, and reduces the overall cost of regulatory compliance. Now, the benefits of Clean Building. Obviously, it's going to facilitate a safe working environment for building occupants by reducing the potential exposure to hazardous materials. It also can minimize the potential for expensive litigation and damages down the road resulting from regulatory actions or occupational illnesses. It can avert costly operational shutdowns, the loss of facility use, penalties, or fines resulting from hazardous material violations. And it can reduce the operational costs for regulatory compliance by streamlining the process of identifying, locating, sampling, documenting, and finally abating the hazardous materials. With that brief overview, I now welcome Tiffany Lamb to take us on a tour of the software and the Clean Building application in ARCHIBUS. Tiffany, welcome.
Thank you, Ayana. All right, the first thing I'm going to give a brief explanation. There is a Clean Building module in ARCHIBUS, which, as Ayana mentioned, it stores the hazardous designated materials within the building. ARCHIBUS also has another module that's similar, but that one is to store the chemical hazards, the ones that are mobile and they could potentially mix together and become something dangerous, or that you have to store MSDS sheets. So that one, the one about the chemicals aren't going to be covered today, but that might actually become a very soon to be delivered future webinar topic. So with that said, our agenda focused around the designated substances. We're going to go through a few workflows, just the idea of what a craftsperson or a facilities management team, for example, an architect person or people that are actually getting to see the data from the outside in kind of thing like that would need to see for a building. We also might go into what a hazardous materials officer does in terms of when they have all the assessments returned to them, and usually a lot of our clients will pass those assessments to a consultant, and they just want to take that data, be able to inventory it, maintain it, and view it. We'll also go through that quick overview of what an abatement worker might go through in terms of dealing with the hazards. So again, that could be from a perspective of a consultant. It might also be someone internally within the organization. So with that said, let's get ready to go. And we're first logged into the ARCHIBUS application, and while we have multiple applications within ARCHIBUS that all feature in on a certain subset of the entire realm of facilities management, our main focus is within this environmental and risk management, where we have that clean building module. So the first thing, as any individual who doesn't necessarily manage the data, I could potentially be just a craftsperson who needs to be able to see, well, which rooms have the hazardous materials. So there's two views. There's one where we can actually drill down by a map view, locate the building, and then open up the floor plans. At the same time, there's also one where we can just go right into the floor plans itself, and it's still the same view. Consistently within all of ARCHIBUS reports is these very diverse filtering tools. So we can slice and dice that information, for example, specifying whether what we're searching for is friable, how reachable it is, whether it contains any hazards, and again, with a lot of companies, because once you have all that abatement done and over time, some of that data might be stale, it might not be up to date. So this is a really great tool for you to specify whether you do have some presumed hazards, because as the facilities continue to live on, they still renovate. Every renovation usually means if it's an older building, you still have to go and abate anything you're going to touch. So sometimes being able to say there's a presumed hazard is always a good thing too. And of course, we also have all the other tools to pick by date ranges, as well as the location pieces. So I will start off with one of our buildings here. And with part of our highlight, we also have the ability to pick and choose our highlights from the drawing that is actually fed by either AutoCAD or Revit. So what I could pick out is I have a few particular highlights for hazard ranking or hazard rating. So let's go ahead and show a rating. So within these hazard ratings, there are these levels, which are these international standards for how dangerous that item is. And that's really more of a term for our hazardous managers. When we look at the rank, we can also compare between something that's high and medium, which is something that more so a craftsperson or just someone looking into the data, because they might be here to do a renovation, that will mean something to them. So if I bring this down forward, I do have that list of the items that are containing the hazards. So let's expand that a little further. And this is just looking into that same data that's going to be collected already, and they would like to know which room it's in, what location it is, whether there definitely is a hazard, and what substance it is, being asbestos, lead, mercury, ODS, and the like. So if I scroll through, we do have all the other typical information that's captured from a hazardous assessment survey, being the quantities, square foot, and units. And these particular units, they're configurable. So that's all part of the data. ARCHIBUS does come with a very wide set of background data that's ready to go, capturing all the different kinds of units, the different hazard ranks and ratings, and the like. So you can also specify your different classifications as well. The ARCHIBUS does come with a standard version, and you can definitely go and use a different one. Again, that's all in the background. And most importantly, when someone is there to abate that, they can also see the cost factors all the way to the right. And if we ever needed to, as someone who might be a facility manager of a certain building, they might at any point have the opportunity to export this information to Excel or export that document of the floor plan, letting them know where the assessments are, to a Word document. So in terms of the organization's facility management safety team, there's a few things that happen here. One thing is that an abatement survey is already done. So the data is already provided to you, or you're going to start a brand new one. So either you're going to perform the work or a consultant's going to perform the work. In terms of being able to inventory the data, yes, ARCHIBUS can store the data, and all the previous assessment surveys can be imported to the system. And we'll go through kind of that workflow if we started a brand new survey and assessment. So just 1 second before we do that, we will just quickly go through the idea of some of that background data that you do have control of, being, for example, sample material compositions. So the different types of particular composition of those hazardous or designated substances being lead and asbestos. If we look at something like cellulose, it's got a CAS number, the chemical abstract service number, as well as potentially an MSDS composition to the system. So you could have all that linked into the system, and those are all things you can track and configure and specify the default composition details. We also have different abatement reasons. So again, if you do other things other than the typical abatement of renovation, disturbance, demolition, you might have encapsulation and all these other items that you might actually do as well. So we go into one of these here for renovation. Again, just very simple background setups that you do have control over. And lastly, the hazardous professionals. So without going into whole detail, you could specify your different accreditation types and your sources. So whether someone's an inspector or they're an abatement worker and who accredited them. If we look at one of these records itself, you'll have all their information, including whether they're an internal staff member and if they've got what kind of a license they have and when that was accredited and when it expires as well. So just so you're aware that there are different roles within the system. There could be the manager that manages and creates the assessments versus the abatement worker, the field worker, and the supervisor or the lab inspector. So all these different roles, they could be having the different processes in ARCHIBUS to access. For example, this is a process and they have access to that. So a manager might have access to everything, whereas the abatement worker might just have a subset. So it's time to start defining our project. So ARCHIBUS does store all these assessment surveys as a brand new project. So we'll go ahead and create a project code. These are mostly part of the entry form. When you do see the data that don't necessarily have that red star asterisk as these ones do, those other ones actually mean they're optional fields to put in. So if we don't know it, it's okay for us to not fill this in. But however, we do need to fill in some of this other information. Who's my who's my project contact? So again, I have my list of all my contact users that I could slice and dice and find my particular contact person. We also have our different hazardous substances. So I could start filling this in, or I could use the select value and pull up what my choices are. Again, these are just the samples part of ARCHIBUS. You could add in extra ones that you do track, for example, mercury and the like. So we'll just start with the very commonly is asbestos. And specify any locations if you know it. So I'll just fill that in and we'll go ahead with that. Now that we have our project ready, we can start managing and looking into the assessments. We have a list of our current assessment projects. So here's the one I just made, and we'll select that. And right now there's no assessments. So what we could do is, of course, we can add new one at a time, which is okay when someone is actually entering it as they go. We also have the ability to generate. So what the generate does actually is it actually pre-fills a lot of that information for us. Let's give it a shot. So the generate tool first is going to give us ask us for some conditions that we're going to search for. Are we just looking at every individual room, or are we just looking at the floors and looking for a certain type of material? So again, this location of materials is a required field. So if I pull this up, you've noticed we've got a list of locations. That's actually also part of that background data. So you can also specify if there's additional material location types that aren't being covered here. So pretty standard as part of the surveys. You could have multiple, so I could have someone checking windows, walls, roofs, and doors. And we'll save that. And then again, we can also slice and dice and say, okay, I just want to generate records for all my floors. I don't care which room it is. But usually what you would love to do is get it as granular as to the rooms, because it's pretty important for, in most assessments, to be able to identify the exact precise location of an actual assessment when it comes to the designated substances. So we can also specify some default values as well, who it's assigned to. So that assignment is going to be those professionals we designated before in our background data, as well as other particular users. So if someone's an abatement worker, I might be able to pick them as well. In this case, because I'm in this particular demo, I'm just assigning this all to myself so we can see that life cycle of it. And we'll generate. So you can also restrict that here too, whether you just want to do one floor at a time. Because basically what this thing is going to do when I generate, it's going to look for every single room within my building. And then for every single location, it's going to generate a record on that top of that. So we're going to come back and say, okay, so I know there's actually about 100 rooms in my building, but this is going to actually generate 693 assessments, which is pretty handy, especially when you look back in some assessments and there's actually thousands of records per building. But this definitely gives you the tool sets for you to, for example, if you want to export this out to an Excel or transfer this into an Excel file that you can pass to a consultant, and they'll actually have that format that's ready to be absorbed back into ARCHIBUS that they can use. So if I bring this down a bit, we do have all these 693 assessments, which currently don't necessarily have all the details that they need to, but that's where we'll have someone go through it. They might go and edit multiple, they can edit one at a time, and then specify all these details. That's pretty standard with a assessment. So now that I've kind of covered through that, I'm actually going to go back, and I have a project that's already set and ready to go, just so we can see more details with it. I can also open up some details within that project itself to see that same information in terms of the overall project details. And if you have those other surveys in the past, or you can definitely copy them over as well as part of your tools. You can see we have these copy selection buttons. So if you have this assessment that's already done, and say it's 3 years from now that we're going to do a brand new assessment again, you can definitely copy these selections of all these assessments and create a brand new project with that as well. So then that will be the 2019 assessment, for example. So very quickly, you do have the tools to mass generate records and also copy and such. With this particular sample, if we were to look up one of my records, let's go in there and take a peek at the information. We do have as you can see here, we don't necessarily have to fill everything out, but we do have the ability to do so, including the location drawings, location documents. But definitely what's most important is being able to identify the quantity and the units, number of pipes, for example, if that applied to the lead, for example, and whether it is accessible. Our condition values and our priority. So the nice thing within ARCHIBUS is that we do have scoreboards which are based on priority. Basically, when we do pick out the information and have it in ARCHIBUS, it means we can run the scoreboard sheets, which we'll see later, that rank how important it is to deal with certain designated assessments earlier than later, as they'll sit higher in our priority ranking. So it's a very qualified measurement for us to review this information. And any recommended action. For example, we have the clean, adjust, remove, and repair. You might end up adding extra ones like encapsulate and such. Most importantly are that baseline information of the baseline costs. And usually your engineering firm or your consultant firm will provide you this information. With a lot of clients, what happens is that when they first get that survey done, they typically don't do any actions. So they go and budget for that work to be done later at another time. So of course, costs and things like that tend to go up every year. So some engineering firms will actually provide you with the estimated new expense costs over time when you finally do work on it. But within ARCHIBUS, you do have the tool sets to capture that kind of information. And of course, you do have the opportunity to change that to your own fitting as well as to do your own little internal survey of going through and confirming how much these are going to cost when you do start working on them. What you do see now is the next piece is the samples and test results. So with every assessment, someone is going to go through, cut a piece of the designated substance off, if there is any in there, or actually the building materials off. So you can actually store that information of all the pieces that were being taken as part of that sample. And when we do have our samples, we also could potentially have lab results with it. We'll expand that a little bit. So we do have some lab details that we do store within the system as well. You can track your different labs, and with the different, depending on the type of material, you might have more than one reading. So when we look at these particular lab results, it can tell us what the composition is for that particular item, being the cellulose and the quantifier and any units to it. And if there's additional readings, for example, you can also copy that over actually. We can just copy as new, and then it will be a new record into our particular database. You can also specify which particular reading is actually active still, because obviously if you do multiple readings, then one's going to be outdated. And some of you have been using other tools within ARCHIBUS, such as project management and lease management. So you might be familiar with the idea of communication logs. So you do have the communication logs feature here also with the hazard assessments. You can add a brand new one, and you can specify what kind of communication it is, being meeting notes, correspondence, things like that. So all that can be tracked in, as well as any uploaded documents related to that particular communication about that assessment. Let's go and open up one of these ones here. So in this particular one, you could choose to upload a document if you like, and also just describe what that particular log is going to be about. We also can choose to have action items. So this is where we can designate things that would be pushed into the other areas within ARCHIBUS. For example, if I look in one of these here for taking a sample as one of my action items to do with this particular assessment, we have I guess you can look at action items as a work item. So the assessment itself is just the assessment. The action items are things you can store in terms of part of all the action items you'll do to eventually bring this assessment into a safe state. So again, you can have multiple actions designated who it's being assigned to. And again, you can also specify a problem type. So that would be very close to, that will make it, bring it over to building operations as well as an option. We also specify any priorities with it so that we can go through a workflow for your building operations later on. If we look in that duration and cost, we also store that particular information. So if you've seen project management, this is kind of familiar to you in terms of an action, having this specify the duration and hours estimated. So again, basically so you can run different reports against that, and any additional locations that might be impacted by the assessment. So this one here, my particular assessment is by room. If you do yours by floors, then you do have the option to individually say that the location breakout in the rooms that are impacted go in here. So you do have some options depending on how you work your flow. Let's add a brand new one actually, real quick here. And as you see here, this particular action type is going to go into my maintenance, so that's going to be routed to my building operations. So after someone maybe takes the samples, and I might want them to patch up the location because they've cut up a slab of the building material, and we can assign it to someone as well. We can specify our dates. And this particular description, you can see here it was auto-filled for me, but that was taking in all my information regarding that assessment and passing that on, because the next person who works on this might not actually know anything about the assessment, and they're just here to help abate it as a craftsperson. So they would need to know this kind of information. And again, we do have the idea of that service request. So we have the action items, they can push out to a service request, and then we can view those as they go through their process. We can also see related on-demand work. And as well as any history to that particular work request that was in progress for. Lastly, as we make changes to the data, we do track the history. So if I change values within my current assessment, I can view what the previous data was and anything that was done to it in terms of all the information that is stored during that snapshot. So that is that concept of being able to store that hazardous assessment details. The next part we want to visit is say, your summary charts. And a lot of that is going to be looking into evaluating our data. So what we could do is we could narrow it down per project. I can also select all of them. I can also restrict my data and basically hit the show button, and we can do our counts. Being able to understand the statistics of all our different substances being, in this case, mold, lead, or asbestos. So we've got a difference in our room counts. Some might just say it's in the building. Some might say it's per floor. We can also bring that up and open up the details that were related to it. And we do have some general statistics, basically what that cost is looking at. We do have the opportunity to look into a scoreboard. But basically what happens before we can look into a scoreboard is that that abatement worker would be going through first and then specifying some of the information about it. So they might have designated activities to them, designated work to them. So let's just look into one of these here. You might see that this is now suddenly a very simple screen because as an abatement worker, these are the things the projects I have worked to. So let's open up my project. And I have only 108 of these to work on. So I might go through and I can edit one at a time. As you might see, I can also edit multiple and update that information. So mainly it's just to bulk update the abatement information. So if I've gone through and I've taken care of these items, and I can specify the date that we've abated it, and any notes there. So that does an update through all that information. As well as someone who goes in to deal with the abatements, they might continually go into these, change the information, and as you might notice, some of this becomes locked out. So as we said, ARCHIBUS is kind of a role-based system where the manager had full access to the data, and basically the abatement worker is just here to help specify what that condition is right now. Or they might be there to just assess, as an assessment worker, for example, they might just be there to assess the cost for doing those abatements. But you do have access to things such as any samples that you should be aware of, as well as any other activities that have gone on. So you do have the ability to see information regarding that particular assessment. So now say that someone as a field assessor and abatement worker, they've gone in and filled in all the information regarding costs, regarding the work to be done. You could go to and review scorecards. You can select one project at a time or even multiple. So we'll just select our one project for now and show that. So at any point, you can look into the live data, and ARCHIBUS will gather up any kind of assessments you still have active that needs to be abated, and which ones are at the worst condition. So as you look here, we have a not entered versus the good and maintain. Basically, these particular conditions have a certain ranking to them. So life safety and being unacceptable is probably hitting in that deep orange zone where we don't really want these sitting in our organization or in our facilities, and we'd want to take care of these sooner versus the ones that are kind of in this lighter orange, where if we don't take care of it right away, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, because ultimately at the end of the day, all these particular assessments do have a estimated budget. So if we look into our budget and we can only take care of the items that are within unacceptable and poor range, then we can focus our particular budget on just those items this particular year and then deal with them later on for abatement. And usually what happens in most organizations is that they do kind of a program where the goal for next year might just to be replace all the CFL light bulbs and turn them into LED bulbs. So all those items could be replaced and you'd be able to locate them, abate them, and so forth. You can see that when I clicked on that particular unaccessible range that I can also pull up which exact assessments they were, and then also look up that information regarding to them as well. So that last little bit is actually going into the mobile framework. And I will first off minimize the screen a little bit so we can see the idea of the ARCHIBUS mobile framework. So as you generate your assessment items and they get assigned to an abatement worker, that could go through your building operations. That means that someone going into the maintenance app on their phone or on their tablet, they would have access to the assessments to be abated. So let's look at some of my issued tickets here. And of course, within ARCHIBUS is that we have the ability to see all sorts of tickets. So right now I have a viewing of all my preventive maintenance tickets. I can certainly run a filter and then search for that problem type for condition assessments, my hazardous materials abatement problem type, which is really just within in here. And abate. So I have one particular ticket assigned to me. And as you notice, this particular information was generated from the particular assessment survey, so that as a craftsperson who is there to take care of this particular vinyl flooring, I will know information about that in particular. And again, then I can put my time entry to say that I worked 2 hours on this particular abatement, specify that particular craftsperson's code, and we'll go ahead and we can specify our start and time. So let's just go and say we start working on that. And save those records. And of course, within ARCHIBUS, with the way right now we're actually in the mobile framework in the version 23.1 of ARCHIBUS, meaning we can actually have multiple craftspersons working on this particular ticket to abate our hazardous assessments. We can also add in, since it's now in the realm of building operations, we can still do things like add in the different parts, the tools that we're renting, and any additional costs and documents for it. And we'd have the opportunity to, I guess, look into the location and potentially mark up that drawing as well. We can also take a picture of the situation that we see. And then we can complete this particular work ticket. And when this gets completed, then it also gives information back to that facilities manager or the particular hazardous materials supervisor or manager to see all that information about their abatement results within their inventory. So that is pretty much the conclusion of our Clean Buildings demo, and I will be passing the mic back to Ayanna.
Thank you. Thanks, Tiffany. So definitely thank you for your time, and thanks for all our listeners today that joined us or have downloaded the time. Obviously, ARCHIBUS will provide, and what we've seen today offers more control, data management, and reporting. Tiffany is an application architect who comes from the from the client side of things with the Calgary Board of Education. She worked where you guys did, and they had actually done a fair amount of customization to the core product on a previous version. They helped to kind of be the background for what you actually see now in the clean building. The ARCHIBUS team has always folds in great content and functionality from the user perspective, from the businesses that are looking to get additional controls. So it's neat that you were able to walk us through it, Tiffany. I really appreciate your time. If you guys have questions or have suggested topics, definitely contact us or go to horizon.ca for more videos or sign up for our newsletter. And I'd like to thank everybody and enjoy the rest of your day.